My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 34 years old. And the night my family finally lost me, it did not begin with shouting. It began with candlelight, with folded linen napkins, with waiters in black shirts carrying plates of handmade pasta through a restaurant where everyone spoke a little too loudly, laughed a little too hard, and pretended money was just background noise. It began at my mother's birthday dinner. And for most of my life, that was exactly how my family hurt me. Not loudly. Not honestly. They hurt me politely. With smiles. With jokes. With little comments sharp enough to bleed, but soft enough that if I reacted, I became the problem. My mother, Marilyn Whitman, had turned 62 that weekend, and she chose an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. The kind of place with impossible parking, gold lighting, and menus that did not list half the prices unless you asked. Nobody asked. They never did. Because in my family, price only mattered when someone else had to pay. And for years, that someone had been me. I was not the oldest daughter. That was Bethany, the polished one, the one my parents treated like a family achievement, even when she failed upward through every crisis. I was not the youngest either. That was Vanessa, dramatic, fragile, always one emergency away from needing money and one compliment away from forgetting who helped her survive the last one. I was the steady one. The responsible one. The daughter with a good job, no husband, no children, and apparently no life urgent enough to protect. So when someone needed rent, I helped. When someone needed groceries, I transferred money. When my parents wanted a vacation but called it a small break after a hard year, I covered the hotel and let them tell people it was a gift from all of us. I told myself that was love. For a long time, I really believed it. That night, I arrived with a small wrapped gift under my arm and no wallet in my purse. That part was intentional. I had left it at home, on my kitchen counter, next to my keys, where I had stared at it for almost a full minute before walking out. Not because I was broke. Not because I wanted drama. Because I wanted to know. Just once, I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped stepping into the role they had written for me. The restaurant was already loud when I walked in. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the table like he owned the room. My mother was beside him in pearl earrings, smiling at everyone except me. Bethany was laughing with two cousins I barely spoke to. Vanessa was taking pictures of her cocktail from 3 different angles. When I approached, my mother looked at the gift first, then at me. "You made it," she said, like she had been hoping I might not. "Happy birthday, Mom." I handed her the gift. She peeled back the corner of the wrapping paper before dinner had even started, then paused when she saw it was a photography book. A collection from a coastal town in Maine she had once told me she dreamed of visiting. For a second, something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Then Bethany leaned over and said, "Oh, that's thoughtful." The way she said thoughtful made it sound like cheap. Vanessa smirked into her glass. I sat down without answering. Dinner began the way it always did. My father ordered wine without checking the price. Bethany ordered appetizers for the table and made sure everyone knew she had barely eaten all day. Vanessa complained about rent going up again, loud enough for my mother to sigh sympathetically. I watched them. That was all I did at first. Watched my father charm the waiter. Watched my mother glow under attention she never had to earn. Watched Vanessa mention stress, bills, and being overwhelmed every time conversation slowed. Watched Bethany glance at me whenever money came up, like she was checking whether the hook had caught. And something inside me grew very still. Because when you finally stop defending people in your own mind, you start seeing them clearly. After dessert, my father stood and tapped his spoon against his glass. The table quieted. He gave a speech about my mother. About sacrifice. About family. About loyalty. He talked about how proud he was to have raised daughters who understood what it meant to stay close. Then he turned toward me and smiled. Not warmly. Triumphantly. "This guest," he said, pointing at me with the hand still holding his wine glass, "doesn't belong at this table anymore." For half a second, nobody moved. The words seemed to hang there, too ugly for such a beautiful room. Then one of my cousins laughed. Another followed. Bethany covered her mouth, but not fast enough to hide her smile. Vanessa lifted her glass and said, "Finally." My mother looked down at her plate. That was the part I remembered most. Not what my father said. Not even Vanessa's toast. My mother looking down. Because that was when I knew. This had not slipped out. This was not a joke that went too far. They had known. Maybe not every word, maybe not the exact timing, but they had known something was coming. And no one had planned to stop it. I looked around the table at the faces of people I had helped, forgiven, defended, rescued. No one looked shocked. No one looked sorry. They looked entertained. Like I had finally become the evening's dessert. So I smiled. It surprised even me how calm my voice sounded. Then dinner is on you. My father's smile twitched. Vanessa blinked. Bethany lowered her glass. I stood, picked up my coat, and walked out. No speech. No tears. No slammed chair. Just the soft sound of my heels crossing the restaurant floor, while the table behind me sat in stunned silence, realizing too late that the person they had humiliated was also the person they expected to pay. Outside, the air was cold. I walked 2 blocks to my car. My hands did not shake until I reached the parking garage. Then they shook so badly, I had to sit there for a minute with both palms on the steering wheel, breathing through something I refused to call grief. 30 minutes later, the calls started. Vanessa first. Then Bethany. Then my father. Then my mother. Texts followed. Where are you? This is childish. You embarrassed Mom. The bill is insane. You always help with family dinners. Are you seriously doing this over a joke? Claire, answer your phone. The total came through in one of Bethany's messages. $2,840. I stared at the number. Then I turned my phone face down and poured myself a glass of water because even alcohol felt like giving them too much power over the night. It was never about the bill. That was what they would never understand. It was about the way they laughed before they realized I had left them with it. It was about my mother looking down. It was about being invited to my own humiliation and expected to fund the catering. At 10:37 p.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. My parents stood outside my building. Vanessa was with them, arms crossed, face red from either crying or rage. I did not buzz them in. A neighbor leaving the building did it for me. By the time I opened my apartment door, they were already in the hallway. My father walked in first. We need to talk. No hello. No apology. No shame. My mother followed, clutching her purse like she was the injured party. Vanessa came last, glaring at me as if I had stolen something from her. My father stood in my living room and looked around like he still had authority there. What was that tonight? He demanded. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because the question was so perfectly wrong. What was that? I repeated. You walked out of your mother's birthday dinner, my mother said. Do you know how humiliating that was? I looked at her. Humiliating for who? Her mouth tightened. Vanessa snapped. You made everyone uncomfortable. No, I said quietly. Dad did that when he told a restaurant full of people I didn't belong there. My father waved his hand. It was a joke. Vanessa toasted it. She was reacting, he said. To what? The punchline you practiced? That landed. For the first time, my father had no immediate answer. My mother stepped in, voice softer now, the tone she used when she wanted guilt to sound like concern. Claire, your sister is under a lot of pressure. We all are. You know that. There it was. The turn. The real reason they came. Not to repair. To reset. Vanessa's rent. Bethany's problems. My parents' comfort. The family machine had jammed, and they had come to push me back into place. I looked at all 3 of them and felt something inside me detach. I'm done, I said. Vanessa scoffed. Done with what? With being useful and calling it love. The room went silent. I continued before I could lose my nerve. I'm done paying for dinners where I'm mocked. I'm done covering bills for people who treat me like an inconvenience. I'm done being told I'm too sensitive by people who survive because I'm too loyal. My mother's face changed. For a second, she looked afraid. Not sorry. Afraid. Because she finally understood this was not about one dinner. My father's voice hardened. So you're cutting off your family over a misunderstanding? No, I said. I'm accepting that there was never a misunderstanding. I understood perfectly tonight. Vanessa stared at me. You're serious? Yes. You'd let me struggle? I looked at her for a long moment. The sister who had raised a glass to my exile. The sister whose rent I had paid for 13 months. The sister who had never once said thank you without sounding annoyed. I'm going to let you be responsible for your own life, I said. She flinched like I had slapped her. My father pointed toward the door, though it was my apartment. You need to calm down. I need you to leave. No one moved. So I said it again. Leave. They looked confused, all three of them, like I had spoken in a language they did not know. But eventually, they left. When the door closed, the silence felt enormous. Not empty. Clean. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For a few minutes, I forgot. Then, everything returned. The restaurant. The laughter. My mother's lowered eyes. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and found the automatic transfer. Every month. $1,300. Vanessa's rent. I stared at it, remembering the first time she cried to me about losing her apartment. Remembering how my mother called afterward and said, "You're the only one who can really help her." Remembering how temporary became expected. How generosity became payroll. I clicked cancel. The screen asked me to confirm. I did. No message. No warning. No explanation. Vanessa would find out soon enough. 4 days, probably. And when she did, my family would call it cruelty. They would call it punishment. They would say I had changed. But that wasn't true. I had not changed. I had only stopped paying them to pretend they loved me. The storm arrived exactly 4 days later. Not gradually. Not subtly. It hit all at once, like something that had been building pressure behind a wall and finally found a crack. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Rent bounced. What happened? I stared at the message while sipping coffee that had already gone cold. There was no, hey. No, can we talk? No, is everything okay? Just a transaction that failed. A system error. A missing paycheck. I set my phone down without replying. It buzzed again almost immediately. Then again. Then a call. I let it ring. By the third call, I muted her number. By the seventh, I felt nothing. An hour later, my mom called. I watched her name flash across the screen until it went to voicemail. Then the notification came. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Her voice came through strained, trembling in that familiar way she used when she wanted to sound like the victim before anyone could question the facts. Claire, your sister is in tears. Her rent didn't go through. She didn't know the payment would stop. Why wouldn't you tell her? She could get evicted. I stopped the voicemail halfway through, because the truth was painfully simple. I didn't tell her, because no one had ever told me I was allowed to stop. For over a year, that payment had gone out like clockwork. $1,300. Every month. No conversation. No acknowledgement. No gratitude. Just expectation. Vanessa had cried once. One night. One panic. One story about being so close to losing everything. And somehow, that single moment turned into a permanent solution. Mine. I picked up my phone and scrolled through our old messages. There were no thank you texts. No, I appreciate you. Just things like, can you send it a little earlier this month? My rent increased, by the way. I need help again. Not requests. Adjustments. Like I was payroll. Like I was infrastructure. Like I was not a person. I locked my phone and went about my day. Or, at least, I tried to. But silence never lasts long when people are used to access. At 1:46 p.m., my building's front desk called. There's someone here asking for you. I already knew. Who? She says her name is Vanessa. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course. Because if she couldn't reach me digitally, she'd show up physically. Don't let her up, I said. There was a pause. She's already here. I turned toward my front door just as the knocking started. Sharp. Fast. Relentless. Claire, I know you're in there. I didn't move. Open the door! The knocking got louder. Are you serious right now? I walked slowly toward the door and stopped just short of it. Close enough to hear her breathing on the other side. Close enough that if I spoke, she'd hear every word. But I didn't open it. Claire, she said again, voice cracking now. I don't have anywhere else to go. The words hung there.
Heavy. Desperate. Familiar.
Because she had said something like that once before. And that was the night everything changed. The night I became responsible for her life. You're really going to ruin me over a dinner? She shouted. That was the moment something inside me settled. Not hardened. Settled. Like a truth finally landing where it belonged. I didn't ruin you, I said through the door, my voice steady. I just stopped saving you. Silence. Then a bitter laugh. Wow. Wow, Claire. That's cold. I didn't respond. You think you're better than us now? No, I thought. I just finally stopped thinking I was less. You're unbelievable, she snapped. Then the footsteps. Sharp. Fast. Fading down the hallway. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close before I moved away from the door. My phone buzzed again 10 minutes later. This time, it was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was calmer than my mother's. Colder, too. This is family, he said. You don't pull support over something like this. You're better than that. I almost smiled. Better.
Responsible.
Dependable.
All the words they used when they needed something from me. All the roles I had filled without ever being asked if I wanted them. I didn't respond. And that's when the pattern began. 2 full days. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. Rotating between guilt, anger, and something that almost sounded like panic. Bethany texted once. Short.
Sharp.
Don't punish everyone because you're mad at Vanessa. I read it 3 times. Because that was when I realized something important. They all thought this was about Vanessa. About rent. About one decision. One moment. One reaction. They still didn't see it. Years. It was years. Years of quiet transfers. Of swallowing comments. Of showing up. Of being useful. And I was done explaining it to people who had never tried to understand. So I stopped responding entirely. And I made one call. To the only person in my family who still listened without trying to control the outcome. My grandfather. Arthur. He answered on the second ring. Claire, he said, his voice steady. I was wondering when you'd call. That surprised me. You heard? I heard enough to know there's more. I sat down on my couch and told him everything. Not just the dinner. Everything. The rent. The groceries. The vacations. The way every favor became expectation. The way every boundary became betrayal. The way love had been slowly replaced with obligation until I couldn't tell the difference anymore. He didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. Then he asked one question. What do you want me to do? I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. Because for the first time, someone wasn't telling me what I should feel. They were asking what I wanted. Tell them the truth, I said. All of it. Another pause. Then, okay. No hesitation. No warning. Just agreement. And just like that, something shifted. Not in my family. Not yet. But in me. Because for the first time, I wasn't protecting them. I wasn't filtering their behavior to make it easier to love them. I wasn't carrying their image on my back. I was letting it fall. The fallout didn't take long. By the end of the week, I started hearing things. Secondhand. Through people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Whispers traveling faster than facts ever could. My parents were furious. Vanessa was devastated. Bethany was disappointed. And I was twisting the story. That word stuck with me. Twisting. Like the truth needed distortion to be believable. Like reality itself was negotiable. But I hadn't twisted anything. I had just stopped hiding it. 3 days of silence followed. No calls. No messages. Nothing. It was so quiet, it almost felt unnatural. Like the air before a storm. Then, on the 4th day, my phone buzzed. A Facebook message. From someone I barely expected. Carla. Technically, my cousin. In reality, more like a quiet observer who had always hovered at the edges of family gatherings. We had never been close. But she had always been watching. Her message was simple. Hey, I heard what happened. I'm really sorry. I always thought something was off. I stared at it longer than I should have. Because it was the first time anyone in my family had said that. Not defended. Not questioned. Just acknowledged. I typed back, "How did you hear?" Her reply came quickly. "Grandpa told everyone at brunch." Of course he did. I could almost picture it. Arthur sitting at the head of the table, calm as ever, speaking without drama, without exaggeration, just laying out the truth, piece by piece. No raised voice. No theatrics. Just facts. And in a family built on performance, that was devastating. Carla sent another message. He told them everything. The dinner, what Uncle Robert said, what Vanessa did, the rent, all of it. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Not exactly. But something close. Like I had been holding my breath for years without realizing it. And now, finally, I wasn't. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A text from my dad. "You humiliated your mother." I read it once. Then again, waiting for something else. A question. An explanation. A single acknowledgement of what had actually happened. Nothing. Just that. And in that moment, everything became clear. This had never been about money. Not really. It wasn't about the dinner, or the rent, or even the years of quiet support. It was about control. And for the first time in my life, they were losing it. And they didn't know what to do next. 3 days after my father's message, a package arrived. No return address. My name, written in thick black marker, like someone didn't trust a label printer to carry the weight of what they were sending. The box wasn't large.
Medium-sized. Light.
Sloppily taped. I almost didn't open it. For a moment, I stood there in my kitchen, keys still in my hand, staring at it like it might explain itself if I gave it enough time. It didn't. So I cut the tape. Inside was a collection of things that felt intentional, not valuable, not meaningful in the way gifts are supposed to be, but carefully chosen. A few old shirts I had left at my parents' house years ago, a chipped coffee mug from college, a school photo of me at 10 years old, hair uneven, smile too wide, eyes still hopeful in a way that made my chest tighten just looking at it. And a card. Plain. Dollar store cheap. Blank on the front. Inside, one sentence written in tight, controlled handwriting. If this is what you want, then here it is. No name. No explanation. But I didn't need one. Because that was exactly how my family communicated when they didn't want to admit what they were doing. They weren't apologizing. They were reframing. I wasn't someone who had been pushed out. I was someone who had walked away. I closed the box slowly. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just clear. That afternoon, I took the entire thing to a donation center 2 blocks from my apartment. I didn't keep the photo. I didn't keep the mug. I didn't keep anything. Because it was never about the objects. It was about the message. And I had already received it. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I left every family group chat. Every thread. Every place where my name existed as a contact they could summon when needed. Then I blocked them. Vanessa first. Then my father. Then my mother. I hesitated on Bethany. Not because she deserved more time, but because she had always been the hardest to read. Not openly cruel. Not openly kind. Just aligned. Always aligned with whatever version of the story made her life easier. In the end, I blocked her too. And just like that, silence. Real silence. Not the kind that comes from ignoring notifications. The kind that comes from no longer being reachable. I expected something dramatic after that. A knock at the door. A scene in the lobby. More messages from new numbers. But none of it came. Instead, something stranger happened. They adapted. A week later, Carla messaged me again. This time, she didn't say anything at first. She just sent a screenshot. Instagram. Vanessa's account. I opened it. And there they were. My family. All 4 of them. On a beach. Bright sun. Clear water. Matching drinks in their hands. Smiling. Not just smiling.
Performing.
Hashtags stretched across the caption. Hashtag family strong. Hashtag finally peace. Hashtag moving forward. Vanessa had tagged a luxury resort in Florida. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Because it didn't make sense. Not with the story they had been telling. Not with the panic. Not with the rent crisis that had supposedly pushed Vanessa to the edge. They didn't look like people struggling. They looked like people celebrating. And that was when it hit me. Not slowly. Not gently. All at once. They were never struggling. Not in the way they claimed. Not in the way that justified everything they had taken from me. They had money. They had options. They had each other. They just didn't want to spend their own resources when mine were easier to access. I felt something then. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder.
Understanding.
That same evening, Carla sent more screenshots. This time, messages. Vanessa's messages. Forwarded to extended family. I opened the first one. Claire suddenly cut me off without warning. I don't know what I did to deserve this. The second? She's been acting really unstable lately. I think she's just unhappy and taking it out on us. The third. We've always supported her emotionally, but she's pushing everyone away. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so precise. They weren't just reacting. They were building a narrative. Carefully.
Strategically.
Piece by piece. And the more I read, the clearer it became. They were better off without me. Financially.
Emotionally.
Socially. And yet somehow, I was still the villain. I didn't respond to Carla right away. I needed time. Not to calm down, but to decide. Because silence had protected them for years. And now, it was protecting them again. I had never told anyone the full story. Not really. I had covered for them. Explained things away.
Minimized.
Filtered. But now that I wasn't there to do that, they were doing it themselves. Rewriting everything. And for the first time, I realized something important. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is power. And I had been giving it to the wrong people. So I wrote something. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just factual. Start to finish. Dates.
Amounts.
Names. I listed every payment. Every transfer. Every time I had stepped in quietly to fix something they didn't want anyone else to see. Vanessa's rent. My parents' vacations. Groceries for Bethany's household. Expenses that had been disguised as shared support. I attached screenshots. Not to embarrass them, but to make it undeniable. And at the end, I wrote one final line. I didn't walk away because I was angry. I walked away because being useful to people is not the same as being valued by them. Then I sent it. Not to everyone. Just 8 people. The ones I knew were hearing the other version. The ones who mattered enough for the truth to reach them. Then I put my phone down and waited. Most didn't respond, which I expected. Because truth doesn't always create reactions. Sometimes it just creates discomfort. But 2 did. Nathan, one of my cousins. I had no idea. I'm sorry, Claire, that's messed up. Short.
Honest.
Enough. The second surprised me more.
My uncle.
My mother's brother. We hadn't spoken in years. His message was longer. I always wondered why your parents treated you like you owed them something. Now I understand. Thank you for saying it out loud. I read that message twice, then closed the app. Later that night, my phone rang.
Unknown number.
I ignored it. A voicemail followed. I knew before I listened who it would be.
My mother.
Her voice was different this time. Not soft. Not emotional.
Sharp. Controlled.
I hope you're happy, she said. A pause. People are talking. You've embarrassed this family enough. Another pause. You've always known how to twist things to make yourself look good. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Because even now, even after everything, she hadn't denied it. Not one thing. Not the money. Not the dinner. Not the years. Just anger. That someone else knew. And that was when it truly settled. Not as a thought. As a fact. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about the image. And the image was slipping. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my grandfather. I answered immediately. I saw what you sent, he said. I waited. You told the truth. Simple.
Direct.
Enough. And for the first time in years, I slept without that low, constant pressure sitting in my chest. Not because I had exposed them. Not because I had won anything. But because I had stopped pretending. Stopped carrying guilt that wasn't mine. Stopped financing a version of family that only existed as long as I kept paying for it. And somewhere, in the quiet that followed, I realized something I hadn't let myself consider before. They weren't falling apart without me. They were thriving.
Traveling.
Paying bills. Smiling in pictures. Living exactly the same lives. Just without me funding them. And that changed everything. Because it meant one thing was finally, undeniably true. They had never needed me. They had just needed access to me. And now, that access was gone. 2 weeks after I sent the message, something arrived in my mailbox that felt different. Not a package. Not something impulsive or emotional. A letter. Real paper. Thick, expensive stock. The kind people use for weddings or legal notices. The envelope was typed, clean, precise. No return address. For a moment, I thought it might actually be something official.
A threat.
A warning. Maybe even an attempt to scare me into backing down. I opened it slowly. And the first thing I noticed wasn't what it said. It was the handwriting. My father's. But the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was written to someone else, one of our relatives on my grandfather's side.
A draft.
A version of the story they had been preparing to send out. I read it once. Then again. And with every line, the shape of it became clearer. According to my father, I had changed over the past few years. Become isolated. Emotionally unstable. He wrote that I had pushed the family away and reacted irrationally at my mother's birthday dinner. That they had tried to support me. That they had done everything they could. That I had chosen distance. That I had chosen conflict. That I had chosen this. There was no mention of the rent. No mention of the payments. No mention of the years. Just a carefully constructed narrative where I was the problem that needed explaining. The broken piece in an otherwise perfect system. I folded the letter back along its original crease.
Carefully. Deliberately.
Because there was something almost impressive about it. Not the lie itself, but the confidence behind it. They truly believed this would work. That if they said it clearly enough, calmly enough, people would believe it. Maybe they always had. Maybe that was why it had worked for so long. I slid the letter back into the envelope and set it on the counter. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to respond. Because the letter didn't tell me anything new. It just confirmed what I already knew. They weren't letting me go. They were trying to rewrite me. And that was when I made the final decision. Not emotional. Not reactive.
Final.
I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. There were still a few things left. Loose threads. Connections I hadn't cut yet because they were easier to ignore than to deal with. A shared storage unit I had been paying for, full of boxes my parents hadn't touched in years. A cell phone plan Vanessa was still somehow attached to. A couple of small subscriptions that quietly renewed each month. Details.
Leftovers.
But they mattered. Because as long as those things existed, so did the connection. So I closed them, one by one. Canceled the storage unit. Removed Vanessa from the phone plan. Ended every automatic payment, every shared account, every quiet obligation I had once accepted without question. I transferred ownership where I had to, deleted what I didn't. And when I was done, there was nothing left tying me to them. Nothing practical. Nothing financial. Nothing they could use to reach me, leverage me, or pull me back in. Except one thing. My mother's number. I stared at it longer than I expected. Not because I doubted the decision, but because I understood what it meant. This wasn't distance anymore. It was absence. And once I did it, there would be no easy way back. Not for them. Not for me. I took a breath. Then I tapped block. And just like that, it was over. The next few days were quiet. Not tense. Not heavy. Just quiet. And then, unexpectedly, my grandfather called. "They're scrambling," he said without preamble. I leaned back against the couch. What does that mean? It means they didn't think you'd go this far. I almost smiled. They thought I'd come back. Yes, he said. They always do. I let that sit for a moment. They're turning on each other, he continued. My dad? Blaming your sister for pushing too far at the dinner. And Vanessa? Blaming your mother for letting it become public. And Bethany? A pause. Trying to stay neutral, he said, but asking questions. Quiet ones. I nodded slowly. It sounded exactly like them. A system built on control, now unraveling without a central support. They've been calling me, he added. Why? They want to talk. I already knew the answer before he said it. Not to fix things with you, he continued. To fix how this looks. Of course. Not accountability. Not reflection.
Reputation.
I closed my eyes briefly. And in that moment, any lingering doubt disappeared. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a rough patch. It was who they were. And who they would continue to be. As long as someone allowed it. 3 months passed. No calls. No messages. No letters. No surprise visits. It was like I had disappeared. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt something I didn't even realize I had been missing. Quiet. Not the absence of sound. The absence of pressure. No one needing something. No one expecting anything. No one measuring my worth against what I could provide. I slept better. I worked better. I existed without feeling like I owed someone an explanation for it. And then, one afternoon, Carla called. I ran into them, she said. Where? The airport. Of course. Your parents, Vanessa, Bethany? I leaned back in my chair. Vacation? Costa Rica. I almost laughed. Of course it is. Carla hesitated. They looked different. How? Tired, she said. Not physically, just worn out. I didn't respond, because I knew exactly what she meant. Your mom asked about you, Carla added. That surprised me. What did she say? She asked if you were still angry. I let out a slow breath. And? She said, Carla paused. She said you'd come around, that you always do. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. They still didn't understand. They thought this was a phase, a reaction. A version of me that would eventually collapse back into the role they had written. But this wasn't anger. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't distance for the sake of proving a point. It was clarity. It was peace. And peace doesn't negotiate with people who only understand control. I'm not coming back, I said quietly. Carla didn't argue. I know, she replied. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, not thinking about them, not replaying anything, just sitting and realizing something that took me years to understand. I wasn't the difficult one. I wasn't the ungrateful one. I wasn't the problem they needed to explain away. I was the one who stopped participating, the one who stepped out of a system that only worked as long as I kept paying for it. For years, I thought I was holding the family together, but I wasn't. I was holding up an illusion, and when I let it go, they didn't collapse. They adjusted, because they always could have. They just didn't want to. Not when I was there. Not when I made it easier. I wasn't their loss. I was their convenience. And now, I was gone. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just completely. And for the first time in my life, I finally belonged to myself.